Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this week's episode of The Couch Trip with Eddie Reece and myself, Billy Courtright. We're here to have conversations regarding therapy for everyday life. We have a very interesting conversation today. Eddie and I are going to temporarily tie a bow on our series on relationship and talk a little bit about marriage. We're going to talk about marriage, what it is, what it isn't. We're going to talk about prenuptial agreements and maybe reframe that in a way that doesn't seem so scary and has nothing to do with whether or not you trust one another to stay faithful for the rest of your life, or who's going to get the dog or the car or the majority of the funds in the bank account. We realize all those are important, but when you hear Eddie talk about prenups, you may have a completely different opinion. So once again, this episode is going to be coming right at you. Stay tuned. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back and giving us some of your time. We are continuing the Couch Trip series on relationships. If you remember, we've talked about love, we've talked about feeling, communication, relationship, understanding, vulnerability, relatability. And it's been a really, really interesting and, from my perspective, worthwhile and rewarding conversation that Eddie and I have been able to share with you, our audience. And in continuing in that vein, and what will likely be the final chapter in the relationship series for a moment.
Nah. Oh no.
Well, there's so many things I want to talk about.
There's lots more. Oh,
There's
yeah.
lots more. Well, one of the things Eddie and I were just talking about off air is we're essentially talking about marriage and what it means and where people might, need some help to reframe kind of what it is to what they envision it to be. Very consistent and congruent with our image of what love is and our place in a loving relationship, and where this marriage is when we get married and where it could go, and God forbid where it may end up, and how do we prepare, deal, and just navigate those waters if they get a little choppy. So Eddie, you and I were just having a really interesting conversation, and I said, "This is great stuff. Let's hit record." And it was really about kind of where folks are when they contemplate and ultimately decide to get married, and what that vision is for them, and where their heart may or may not be, and then what inevitably could occur. And you were really putting things into perspective I hadn't heard before, and I found truly captivating. So let's just start with that simple question. What do people consider and think about when they decide to get married, and what might they want to consider and think about when they decide to get married?
Yeah. In so many ways, getting married is maybe the second biggest decision you might ever make. First is whether or not to have children. And most people put more thought into picking a house or a car than they do a partner. And the reason it's done that way is because, as you've heard me talk about numerous times here, it's what we were trained to do. There's this romantic ideal out there. It's a bill of goods we've been sold that simply does not exist in real life. And so we're supposed to go meet the right person. And there is no right person. Then we will just know that it's the right person by some magical means. And then after X number of time, dates or months or whatever, you're supposed to get married or you're supposed to break up. Those are the only two choices. I remember a scene in a movie, and I have these snapshot memories of movies. I don't remember what the movie was, what it was about. I just remember the scene. And there's 2 brothers. One of them's married, and the character was played by, um, the guy that played Niles, Fraser's brother,
Mm.
and, his brother's contemplating getting married, and he says to his brother, he goes, how did you guys know should get married?" And he says, "Like everybody else. She told me we're either getting married or breaking up." And that to me is just mind blowing, that it has to come down to an all or nothing choice. I mean, if this is a person that you are so connected, attached, enamored to that you're wanting to marry them, and if for whatever reason they're not too keen on the marriage thing, then you have to have nothing to do with them. This is an amazing human being in your life. They don't come along. Even if you don't get married, somebody this wonderful doesn't come along that often, and you're going to completely discard them for not marrying you. That just so basically everything we're taught about how to go about it is just simply wrong. The way that you would decide is, first of all, you have to have a tremendous amount of self-awareness, meaning I know a lot about me, uh, my life, dislike, preferences, ideas about the future, ideas about what love is, ideas about what marriage is. I've explored and done deep dives into this thing for a long time, and I really know who I am. Very few of us have much of a clue as to who we really are. I wrote a line a long time ago that said the lack of self-awareness in this culture is so bad that when most people masturbate, they're having sex with a stranger. We just don't know really who we are. And one of the things that happens in marriages that then will bring a couple into my office is the shock of who you actually wound up marrying. Because in your mind, it was not the person that they were. They've changed, you know? And just that thought right there doesn't make any sense. Of course they changed. Everybody changes. Why is that a problem, man? So, okay, you and I like each other. And I have this idea that I would like to get married. And okay, well, I do too. Oh, okay. Well, what does that mean to you? Being married? What does that mean to you? What would being married to you look like? Okay. I mean, that's a good start. What I tell folks about that question, or even, and it's the same question, like if you're going to go out and start dating, and especially if you're gonna like write up a profile on a dating app of some sort, don't talk about, oh, I want somebody intelligent and attractive, like some other person wants somebody who's an idiot and ugly. I mean, what does that mean? Okay. It's wasted space. So a good approach is, here is my day to day existence. I generally get up at this time of the day. I generally go to bed at this time of the day. Typical day. I spend my time doing this. I watch these shows. I do these activities. I spend time with these friends. Here's what I do day to day. And I'm really happy with that routine. And then once a year, I'll take a trip somewhere for a couple of weeks, and that'll be my vacation for the year. Other than that, I'm at home, so instead of saying, "Oh, I'm this really kind, loving person, and I'm really smart and active," and yeah, no, here, if you lived with me, this is what you would be living with. I load the dishwasher this way, or I don't even use the dishwasher. I wash all my dishes by hand, and the dishwasher just sits there. I just think that's a waste. Okay, if you walk into my um, living space at any time, you would see that everything is put away. That the floors are dusted. That um, there are pictures hanging on the wall, and they hang perfectly squared away, you know? These are the things you've gotta talk about, right? And you've got to go, "Okay, would that work for me? Could I live in that time?" Because I don't really care where crap winds up, you know?
Right.
And I travel a lot, I take at least 2 long vacations every year, and I take probably 6 or 8 trips of 2, 3, 4 days here and there, and, I'm not at home that much. I'm out rock climbing and running marathons, and, oh, well, I don't even exercise. I just don't see the point in that, Mm, you know, that's what's going to make your marriage, the day-to-day existence,
Right.
right?
So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is if you're authentically yourself through the courting process, whether that be on a dating app or anything else, and really clear on how you choose or enjoy living your single life, you're more likely to attract someone that would be complementary to your existing life. So let's say that that's true. And I'd love to hear your opinion on that. But what do you say to couples that think they found Mr. or Mrs. Right and
Uh-huh.
they're at the point now where it's either marriage or over, and they're
Well,
contemplating marriage.
then they need help with that concept because that you gotta throw that away. You gotta get
Well, you
rid
certainly know that
of
that's
the
true.
idea.
That does happen.
No, it does happen, but it shouldn't.
Okay,
It
well, let's talk about it.
shouldn't because really terrific people that you have a lot of love, kindness, respect for, admiration for, they don't come along all the time. And so here you got one, right? And you're pretty good buddies and you share things and you got a history and you've gone through some difficult times and you've gone through some exciting times. You've got lovely memories, right? And if you had 0 romantic interest in each other at all, you wouldn't throw this person away because they didn't marry you. You'd probably go, "This is one of my best friends." So, if you don't want to be married, then why not be best friends? Why not carry that part of the relationship out? Because that's your relationship. Okay. This whole thing about do we get married or not is really a question of do we make a legal agreement with each other. Not, do we have a relationship or not? We already have a relationship. Right? It's, do we add a legal agreement to the relationship or not? Right? And so the first question I would ask a couple if they come in, for counseling, and they're usually, it's called premarital counseling, which means they've already decided that they're getting married. And I tell them, I go, so how far along in the wedding process are you guys? Oh, well, the invitations are sent out. I go, well, I really am not going to be able to help you a whole lot, because I would want to put you through a process of really exploring all of these things, that we've been talking about, and take a look if you've got the same kind of ideas of what it is you're actually doing. And you're not going to be open to hearing that's going to cause some problems. Oh no, I mean, okay. Well, let's say we came across something like, you come out of the place where you get married, and you hop in the limo, and you drive off, headed towards your honeymoon, and there's a tragic auto accident, and your partner becomes paraplegic in a way to where they'll never have sex again. Stay married to them? Well, I mean, the vow is for life. So the person who is able-bodied, is never going to have sex again. It's okay with you? Well, I mean, I love them, but I'm not asking if you love them. You're never going to have sex again, ever.
In that marriage.
Right. No, in at all. I mean, is that okay? You're gonna stay married, and you're going to be a caretaker for somebody who's paraplegic. That's what you signed on for. That's okay with you? You're 23 years old, you're gonna spend another 60 years or so, maybe, taking care of this person, not having sex, not going, doing the things that you guys could do, as easy as you did. You got to travel. You got to get the wheelchair going. You got to make sure you carry all the, you know, medications and all those things. That that sound that sound all right with you? It sound like, oh yeah, oh shit, yeah, yeah. If I knew that going in, I'd marry him anyway. Really? Would you? So those are the things that I want you to think about. And since the wedding train, not the marriage train, because a marriage is entirely different than a wedding, and you probably have never said, "I want to be married," you know, and pictured the day to day in and out of a marriage. You pictured a wedding. You were really saying, "I want a wedding." You weren't saying, "I want a marriage." Right? So now you got a marriage to a paraplegic. Is that okay? And once you start exploring those things are different, I mean, and the conversation could go anywhere. Well, I made a vow to be faithful, and so now, I just wouldn't have sex anymore. And the person who's paraplegic would might go, that's just stupid, you know. You love sex, I mean, I don't know. I'd feel horrible if you gave up sex. I mean, we work something out. You would think like that? You know?
Wow. And you've
There
clearly had
you
these
go.
conversations.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's rare because most people just follow the protocol they were taught, and then they come in my office 3 years later, 5 years, 25 years later. We got to undo all of that, So you want to sit down and look at the legal component of this. Okay. So you go buy a house, you're going to get a stack of papers like this to sign. Okay. Covering all kinds of stuff. You should do exactly the same thing to get married. That's typically called a prenup, you know, a, a better kind of word for it is a marriage contract or a marital agreement, because what it really should be used for is as you go through this conversation. Okay, you become paraplegic on our wedding day. You put this in writing. Here's what our agreement is. Okay? And you cover all the different things, because if you can put that in a legal document and sign it, then you probably are at least pretty close to really meaning it. But if your hormones are just going, "Wah," and you're thinking about the wedding dress, finally, I'm gonna have a wedding, and they say, "Oh, well, paraplegic, I would stay faithful to you, honey." "Oh, me too," you don't know, man.
Do you often get couples or individuals who are planning to get married? Do you get the question about, my husband, my fiance, my soon-to-be wife is requesting a prenup. I'm not sure. What should I
Oh,
do?
yeah. Yeah.
How does that typically go?
Yeah, that's more common, because they're thinking prenup means it's only about the money. But a prenup and the agreement that, well, first of all, they go, I don't want a prenup. And the other one says, "Oh, man, I'm not going to get married without a prenup." Well, the first thing I tell them is you don't have a choice about whether they have a prenup or not. They go, "What do you mean?" I go, "When you go to the courthouse and get your marriage license, you're signing a prenup written by the state of Georgia. A bunch of lawmakers down at the Capitol wrote it, and they don't show it to you. Does that make any sense to go sign a binding legal contract about how you're supposed to behave in a marriage and how you're going to divorce if you get a divorce without looking at it, written by probably a bunch of old white guys, a zillion years ago? You might want to look at it. And you don't have to use it. You can write your own, which is what I'm suggesting here. You have the conversation to put the legal contract together, which is being very conscious about your marriage. You're already doing the relationship. What about the marriage? That is a legal contract. And if you sign that contract and you do get married, what most people never realize is you will be legally bound to this person for the rest of your life. And they go, "Well, of course, I want to be married the rest of my life." And I go, "No, that's not what I mean. You are going to be legally bound to them, either through that marital agreement or a divorce agreement. It doesn't matter whether you stay married or not. You will be legally bound to that person for the rest of your life. So you might want to put some time and effort into that legal agreement. That's what a marriage is. A marriage is a legal agreement, a legal documented. It has nothing to do with whether you love each other or not. It has nothing to do with whether you live together or not. It has nothing to do with having kids. That's your relationship. You can make all sorts of decisions about your relationship, but what's written at the courthouse will supersede some of that.
And why is it important, in your opinion, to have this conversation prior to getting married? Why is it important, and what risk are you taking, regardless of what the state says? But what typically happens that maybe a couple, young or otherwise, isn't taking into consideration their mindset and what's going to happen inevitably as this marriage matures?
People change. You get married at virtually any age other than 60, 70, 80 years old. You're going to be very different as that marriage goes on. You're going to be very different when you start purchasing things together, when you own a home together, when you talk about what kind of car to buy, you know. Oh, oh, honey, I need a new car, my car is, just, yeah, you do need a new car. Yeah, I'm thinking about, one of those Maseratis, kind of, what? You're gonna spend that much money on a car? You know? Yeah, you know. Fuck. That's not a family car, no. We're gonna go get a used, station wagon somewhere, in good shape. That's just a waste, you know? You should have talked about that before, you know? The things like, just your day to day. What time do you get up in the morning? What time do you go to bed at night? You know, are you a morning person or a night person? If those are really different, it can cause a lot of problems.
Well, I got to say,
Um,
from that perspective, I'm hearing you say, you really want to know what it's going to be like to be married and have that
yeah,
conversation. In today's day and age, do you find it's more common that couples cohabitate or live together before they get engaged, or are people still getting engaged,
sure.
getting married, and then moving in for the
I
first
mean,
time?
both, and I mean, gosh, 15, 20 years ago, I had a couple come in, excuse me, who had lived together for 25 years. Okay. They came in, what can I do for you, man? Well, we just got married, it was 6 months ago or something. I mean, and it wasn't long. And we are fighting like cats and dogs. I mean, we're just all over each other. I don't know what are the problems. Well, I mean, they had a litany of problems. And I go, well, when did all this start? And well, while we were planning the wedding, the day of the wedding, the night of the wedding, we got along really well. At 25 years, that's fine. And I go, well, what people don't understand is when you get married, you have been brainwashed that marriage means this. And if you don't explore what that is, you're gonna be you're gonna be shocked because it could be things like, okay, we live together. Okay, so we behave like this. But if we got married, you wouldn't be going out with your friends 3 nights a week. You're not gonna be spending that kind of money on that, you're not gonna be even a dating relationship to some degree, but certainly when you move into, "We're going to be exclusive now," part of the brainwashing involves, I now have ownership And so now I can dictate how you will and will not behave. Right, that's not gonna work. And people have no conscious knowledge that that's the way it works, that's actually in there. So if you sit down and write out this marital agreement, those kinds of things will come out, and you can actually learn what is in there and go, "Oh, well, I really think being married means this. Wow, and I don't really believe that." You know?
Eddie, do you help couples to draft their marital agreement?
Oh, if well, like I said, it's first of all, it's pretty rare that anybody's gonna come in to do premarital counseling, and if they do,
It sounds like you think it's a pretty good idea.
oh, absolutely, and if they do come in, they're thinking like, "We're gonna talk about how much we love each other, and then you'll give us your blessing." That's what most people think really happens in premarital counseling. But no, I'm gonna put you through the ringer, and help you explore what you really believe, what you really feel, what you really think, how you're really going to behave, and does that really fit? And I'm gonna start with, okay, so you guys wanna get married, yeah. Why? That's my first question. Why? And anytime I've ever had the chance to ask somebody that, it stuns them because they don't have an answer.
What would you consider a good answer?
A good answer is, well, this is somebody that I would like to combine my day-to-day life with. I would like to combine things like my financial life, my purchasing life, the lifestyle I lead. It's somebody that I would like to be there if I'm in the hospital, or I want to be there for them if they're in the hospital. I This is somebody that, if the 2 of you want children, I want to be the mother, the father, of my children. I want to, go through the process of aging with them and what that entails. You would talk about all the stuff that's in that legal agreement that I believe this is someone that I could be legally bound to successfully, you know? That's why I wanna get married, and because I think a married lifestyle makes more sense to me than a cohabitating lifestyle, or a lifestyle of maybe dating the same person forever, but separate houses, and things like that. And what I want to instill in people is you're grown ups. You can do whatever you want to do. You can get married, you can not get married. You can live together for the rest of your life and not get married. You can go draw up all kinds of legal agreements. That's not a marriage. You can uh, date for the rest of your life and live in your separate worlds. And if you want to be sexually exclusive and do that, you can do that. You can do whatever you want to. You don't have to get married. But there is such a cultural brainwashing that happens around marriage that involves just an enormous amount of pressure to conform, right? I didn't get married until I was 46 years old. Not once did I meet somebody and that topic come up at any age over about maybe 30, to where somebody went, "You're 30 and you've never been married?" That was always it was like, nobody ever said, "You're 30 and you've never been married?" God, that is awesome.
Not even an unhappily married guy?
Yeah. I mean, because you're a second-class citizen in our culture if you're past a certain age and not married or divorced. That counts. That's fine. If you're 30 and divorced, that counts. Okay, you're all right. But and especially as I got to 40, um, 42, 43, you're 43 years old and never been married? You know, I'm like, yeah,
And that comes from the societal norm of,
yeah,
get to a certain age, court, marry, have kids, be
exactly. And
miserable.
and then you are legitimate. Right? Sometimes I would respond to that with I'd go, yeah, I'm 43. I've never been divorced.
That's right.
I figured out that the leading cause of divorce is marriage. It's 100% correlation.
Well, yeah.
And and you got to think about the statistics. If you get married, let's just go with 50% of marriages end in divorce. So you got a 50-50 shot to start with. The 50% that stay married, 100% of those end in death. Okay, so that's the outlook. Okay, so and yeah, what I tell people is, let's say you're lucky enough to be the 50% that stay married the rest of your life. The research on that is that 50% generally, the things I've looked at over the years, maybe 30% of those people go, "Yeah, it's a good marriage, and, yeah, it works out for me." So some 70% of the 50 are like, "Oh, they're not real happy." So, I don't know, I'm not good at math, I don't know what the so 100% of the people at the altar, what percentage really go, "Yeah, this worked for me." It's not good odds, and that's not because there's something about getting married. People hear me talk about this and they go, "God, you don't seem to be real keen on marriage." No, I'm married. I got nothing against marriage. I want you to do it right. That's all. I want you to not follow the romantic ideal and expect that to work, because it will not work. It won't.
Walk us through the process of what would give someone an increasingly more positive outlook on the marriage working.
You've done your research, you've done the conversations about the contractual agreement, and you can work out the contractual agreement of your relationship, and that makes sense to you, and in order to even be able to do that, you've gotta be pretty good communicators, which most people aren't. Which is a big problem in all relationships, all marriages, is that the people can't really communicate very well with their partner. So just going through the process of putting that legal agreement together will show you things like, we can't have conversations about things we disagree on. Okay, that could be a problem, so you might want to learn that and then come back to this. So what I love about the idea of we're going to put together a marital agreement is that you're going to go through the process of exploring all these things that you should explore that you will not explore before you go, yeah, this is a good person for me to marry. And you'll have a lot more confidence about it.
You
And
said
you will know that the problems that you're going to have, you're gonna know about those early on. There's not gonna be the surprises down the road about, well, my new car would be a Maserati, and the top of the line Maserati, completely decked out, That would be my new car, and I'm gonna do that about every 3 years. That's not gonna be a surprise.
right. You said something earlier, and it really dawned on me, and you've repeated it. Fundamentally repeated it, or basically repeated it a couple times, and it was around self awareness. You talked
Mhm.
about knowing thyself, loving thyself, understanding. You even hinted to it when you talked about documenting what kind of life someone would want to
Yeah,
have when you talked about the dating app. So what I heard you
yeah,
say was it's important for an individual first to be aware of their own behavior, their own likes and dislikes, their own path in order to
right,
get someone else to coalesce or feather into their path
right,
in a congruent way, as
right.
opposed to two separate paths coexisting.
Exactly. And that's really where everything we've talked about, that's where it starts, that and it's not only to have a satisfying romantic relationship, marriage, it's everything you do. The ability to enjoy yourself, to be satisfied with your life, and all that will happen in your life, right? And a lot of it is wonderful, and a lot of it just is horrifying, right? And there's a lot in between that for most people will bore them to death, right? So you have to have enough self-awareness, which doesn't just mean I know this about me. It says I know enough about myself that when tragedy strikes, I know how to take care of that within myself. I know to reach out and ask for help and take help. I know that I'm going to go through a process of deep guttural pain and heartache and heartbreak, um, and I will heal from that. There's a book that I never read, but I mention the title all the time. The title is "A Good Marriage Will Break Your Heart," and I expanded that to "A Good Life Will Break Your Heart," right? Because at some point, using a marriage, one of you is probably gonna bury the other, right? And, man, if it was a good marriage, that's devastating. And if it's not devastating, then it wasn't that good of a marriage. You're kinda like, well, yeah, she's gone, yeah, you know? I tell the story about I had a therapist early in my time in therapy died, and this guy was really well known, and I went to the funeral service, and his wife, who I'd never met, was sitting, up on the front row, and it's a really long, drawn out Catholic. It's basically a Catholic service and a memorial service. I mean, it went on forever. I'd never experienced anything that being a good old George, born and raised Baptist guy. We were kind of in out of there and getting to the food. Funeral was about a potluck. So anyway, I'm sitting there in the church, and from the moment the service began, from the moment his wife sat down until I left along with everybody else, she wailed. I mean, wailed. And I'd never even thought of using that word until that moment. When I told the story, that's the word that came to me. And it was constant. So the priest is doing his thing, and the eulogies are being done, and she never stopped. And looking back at that, as I talk about things like this, it's like, that is exactly the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
And the message in that book, A Good Marriage Will Break Your Heart, is this, that most people have a mediocre marriage. And I took this into most people have a mediocre life because they don't have the emotional maturity to love that deeply, which means love that deeply means I am going to love with all of my being, which is agreeing to, I want to experience the absolute ecstasy of our time together, of if it's my life, of my time on this planet. I want to experience pure ecstasy. And I know that the only way for that to happen is to experience the depth of pain and heartache and despair. Because in order to really experience anything on the spectrum of human emotion, you've got to be willing to do them all. And if you just want to do one, you can't do just one. That's why a goal of I want to be happy, is not going to work out well for you, because you're going to then try to get rid of all the things that aren't happy, and you're going to have a mediocre life. So if you put your being into your life, into your work, into your relationships of all kinds, and especially the one with yourself, and you live your life to the fullest, then you will be devastated when it ends.
Yeah.
That's the only option if you live that way. And most people simply have, and they don't know it consciously, but they know it, that if I go all in, it's going to come to an end. And I experienced that firsthand as a philosophy when my beloved dog died. And I can't remember if I ever told the story of that in the podcast or not, but my dad brought animals home all the time. I mean, there was alligators, rabbits, anything, any kind of animal, lizards. So all of the animals were family pets, but I eventually got, shorten the story, I got a dog that was my dog. And so this was my best friend. And that dog died a horrible death. He was ripped apart. It was a Chihuahua, one of the bigger Chihuahuas, and he thought he was a German Shepherd. He got ripped apart by a bunch of other dogs, and when he was missing, I went out looking for him, and I found him in his pieces, you know, and I had to bring that home, and I was about devastated because oh, I put everything into loving that dog. And the point of the story is that the heartache, the devastation at I was early teen maybe, was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I didn't even know anything like that existed. And my snapshot memory is of me sitting on my front porch alone and just gutturally, bodily sobbing. In one way, that was wonderful that I could express that. In another way, it was incredibly damaging that no one was there for me because I learned that lesson. Nobody's ever going to be there for me if things are really bad. The other lesson I learned is if I love something that much, it's going to hurt this bad. And as that young teenager, I actually remember the conscious thought of I will never love anything again. So my journey in therapy, if not my whole life, was undoing that. Because that's not the way you want to live, you know? And how different my life would have been if someone had sat with me on that porch while I went through that devastation and gave me the message of you try as much as you need. I see how devastated you. In no way, shape, or form tried to make anything better because you can't. You can't. My beloved's gone. You can't make that better. And if they had been there and witnessed that, I would have learned the lesson that in my worst moments, somebody will be there with me. They're not going to fix it. They're not going to make it better. They're not going to rescue me from this, but they are going to be there. So I don't ever have to go through this alone, which is what the real damage of any trauma is. Doesn't matter what your trauma is. If you go through it alone, there's the damage we've got up there. And so my whole life would have been different if I had learned that lesson. I would have learned the lesson that I don't have to be alone in the worst times. So I don't have to be so afraid of being devastated, which means I don't have to be afraid of loving like that. And then my life's going to be a whole lot more full because I'm not going to avoid, risk and being involved and caring and loving and losing, which you will always do. You're always every day I lose. I lose the day. At the end of the day, I say I'm grateful for the day. That day's gone. I'm another day closer to death. That day's gone. I'm never getting it back. Grieve, 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 grieve.
I'm reminded that the greater the trauma, the greater the calling. And I have heard this story before. I don't know if we shared it with the listeners, and I'm super grateful that you did. But what I hear is that Eddie Reece, the therapist, is the therapist that he is, which I'm biased, but I think he's a pretty badass therapist. But the reason, or one of the reasons, or part and parcel to why and how you're so great is because of the empathy that you have for people, regardless of their circumstance, coming from a place of knowing firsthand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, I'll say it one way or another to clients because whatever it is they're coming in to share with me, they're sure I've never heard this story before. You know, I've never had a client that was this bad. And through the process of it, I let them know, look, you know, I know this neighborhood you're in, and therapy is about walking you through that neighborhood and showing it to you in a different light. It's not the scary, awful place you think it is. You know, it's another aspect of being human. You know, you don't have to avoid it, but you want to go there with somebody who knows the territory. You don't want to go there by yourself. That's what I was doing on that porch. I was in that neighborhood by myself. It's not a good thing to do. So go with somebody, you know, all I ever learned, all I ever needed to know, I learned in kindergarten, that book. It had some basic kind of guidelines. One is hold hands when you cross the street. So you want to do that deep dive and back to our subject matter. The way to do that deep dive is to go this way first and always. There's so much to explore in here. I mean, I don't run out of things to explore in here. Do that first. Then you really have something you can share that is really valuable, really awesome. And you want to find another person, and you will if you are that kind of person, because those kind of people hang out together. And you find that person and they go, oh, yeah, you know, my idea of relationship is it's a deep dive into who we are and exploring, because I get it how trying to achieve deeper and deeper intimacy brings your crap up. That's the best way to bring your crap up, is to get it. If you really want to know yourself, go fall in love. You know, and go through that. And if you really want to know yourself, have kids. Because they will point out every single thing that you have never worked on. Uh, and show you all of that mess inside of you that needs some work. That's how kids love you. They go, Mom, Dad, I know this about you. You really need to take care of that. That's why I'm behaving this way. So you'll see it. You got some issues. And that's what a good loving partner, romantic partner will do for you too.
Well, Eddie, this has been an outstanding episode. We touched on, our tagline being therapy for everyday life is really, was quite accurately exemplified in this episode. We started talking about relationships. We started talking about marriage. We started talking about self-awareness and a real mature view of what marriage is and what it isn't. And we talked about, what couples might want to do or endeavor to do in order to really see, is this what I want? Do I really want to be married to this individual? Or perhaps do I just want a wedding? Or perhaps do I just want someone to witness my life? But
Mhm.
regardless, what I took from today's episode, even before we got into how marriage, which is a significant part of what makes up a life for so
Right.
many of us, but the way you contextualize what makes a good life, and the entirety of the human experience, as exemplified in the terribly traumatic story of losing your dog as an early teenager. But again, it talks about, it reminded me of the Mother Teresa quote, which is love until it hurts and then love some
Mhm.
more,
Mhm.
because the entirety of the human experience wrapped around that four-letter word, followed and accompanied by maturity, self-awareness, and again, empathy. And again, the vulnerability that you demonstrated on this episode. Gosh, I mean, yeah, it truly is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved before. But
Mhm.
again, it's so many of us are going through without the light on, and hopefully
Yeah.
our conversations can shed a little light for those folks.
Yeah, that's pretty much my hope is that through these podcasts that folks can pick up something here and there to help them find out who they really are so that they can learn to really live. And then the other thought I had as I was listening to you, we talked about marriage a lot, but for substitute long-term committed relationship. It doesn't have to be called a marriage. If you just wanna if you get to the point of I wanna be romantically involved with you and I want us to see if we can stay together, okay, that's the same thing. All this same stuff applies, in any kind of relationship where romance is involved. Everything is different. All this stuff we're talking about. Here's another thought. I'm glad I remember this. Here's the difference between a romantic relationship and the rest of our relationships. Because when I talk about all the things, let's do a deep dive into things that, and people are talking about they want to make a commitment. It's all about commitment. I want that you commit. We have all kinds of long-term relationships in our lives. I have friends that I've known for 50 years. Not once did either of us sit down and go, "Okay, we need to talk. We need to talk. Where's this relationship going? Are you going to be with me forever?" And I honestly think if we treated romantic relationships the way we treated those friendships, you would never have to talk about it. It would just happen. It would be, "Hey, I've been thinking about this idea of being legally bound to each other. You don't even have to call it married. What do you think of that idea? That we put a legal contract between us. That would be a better way to do it. I mean, you don't need a engagement. And it's not like, oh, will you marry me? Will you enter into a legal agreement with me for the rest of our lives? Whether it's marriage or divorce, would you do that with me?
Yeah, I don't know if that's how they
Yeah.
want to end The
Yeah.
Bachelor, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be marriage. You can go to an attorney and draw up all kinds of legal agreements.
Sure.
We're gonna buy a house together and this is how the proceeds are gonna work, and this is the way we're gonna treat the house, and neither party can just decide to up and sell it, without discussion of the other. But I mean, you know, you're gonna buy some furniture together. You can throw together a little legal agreement about that. I mean, you don't have to get married.
And yet we do.
Yeah, we do. And again, I think I really do. There's no research on this, but I really do believe that the vast majority of people who are married because they're supposed to be. It's how you gain legitimacy in our culture. Unmarried people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they don't have the same legitimacy in our culture as married or divorced people. And that's so damaging. That's just so damaging. Because it keeps you from going, I'm a little, I'm more this way. You know, I want my romantic relationships to be more like this. You're not allowed to do that in this culture.
Well, this was a good one.
Thanks. This is my idea of a good time.
It is. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking with us till the end. Again, if you're finding this content valuable or relaxing or informative, or you just feel better after spending time with Eddie and myself, do us a favor, like and subscribe. Tell us what you think of the episodes. Give us a question we can answer on air. Give us something to talk about either through the blog or as a subject of a future episode. Or perhaps you'd like to join us in our community and get on our email list and find out where we're going to be, because one of the things Eddie and I want to do is actually take these episodes and turn it into a curriculum that we can share with individuals who are interested in knowing themselves a little better, perhaps being a better partner, perhaps being a better person, and perhaps living a more complete life, which Eddie is so eloquent at describing. So again, we're very grateful for your time and attention. We'll keep doing this. Hopefully you keep coming back. And if you're enjoying it, don't keep us a secret. Take care.
Thanks, Billy.
My pleasure,
See you,
sir.
folks.
Bye-bye.